Okay, so I'd like to start with a couple of verses. Acts 20. And verse 24. It says, "But I do not account my life of any value, nor as precious to myself, if only I may finish my course in the ministry that I received from the Lord Jesus to testify to the gospel of the grace of God." So just notice, to testify to the gospel of the grace of God. And verse 32, "So now, brethren, I commend you to God and to the word of his grace, which is able to build you up and give you an inheritance among those who are sanctified." And again, the word of his grace, which is able to build you up and give you an inheritance among those who are sanctified. My wife and I have been in Southeast Asia for about a year and a half now. And how many people know how many countries? There's actually an official number of countries that are in Southeast Asia. How many know? 11. 11 countries. And they are Brunei. You can look up that later. Might be hard to find. Burma, Cambodia, Timor-Leste, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, the Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. And altogether, those countries make up about 690 million people. So it's quite a substantial population in that area there. Overall, Southeast Asia, there is about 40% are Islam. Buddhism is about 24%. And some of you probably know some of the big Islamic countries. You've got, of course, Indonesia, which is 86% Muslim, Malaysia, 61%, and then you have some other countries that have a large Islamic population. And then Buddhism is also, Pastor Ryan will probably talk in a few minutes about this, but in Cambodia, there's 97% of the population is Buddhism. Laos is 67%, and Singapore is 31%, Thailand 93%. So those are big religions in Southeast Asia, and of course there's many others as far as religions go. You have Hinduism, you have folk religion, and you have also people who are atheist or agnostic. In Southeast Asia, they have this term for being atheist or agnostic that I'd never heard before. And to me, it was like, I didn't really understand when they said it in the beginning. It took me a while. How many can guess? It's like a British way of saying it. You're cheating, though. Sandon, if you say it. Anybody else? Yeah, you're cheating, too. It's called a free thinker. A free thinker is somebody who is an atheist or an agnostic. And it's kind of like a, I think it's a little contradiction. And we use that sometimes. But these are the main religions in Southeast Asia. And there was one verse that I wanted to turn to and that was Romans 5:20. In Romans 5:20 it says, Moreover, the law entered that the offense might abound. But where sin abounded, grace abounded much more. And I was thinking of these words, abound. And it says where sin abounded. And whenever you have like humanity in its like state of emptiness, it's a tremendous void, you have fertile ground for all types of religions, all types of idolatry, all types of, false religions. And you could say in many of these places, when you go there, when you talk to many people, you would say that it abounds. These religions that you come into contact with, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, they abound, and they're kind of deep in some ways. You bump into people, and I bump into great people in Southeast Asia, and they went to like a kindergarten Islamic school, and they get taught from the very beginning these tenets. I meet people that were not even brought up Buddhist by their parents, but several times I met people that were brought to a temple by a friend when they were 10 or 11 years old, and they kept on going, and they got really into it. And I remember meeting somebody in a park recently that he was a young guy in his mid-20s, professional guy, and he was really into the Buddhism. I mean, he was really into it. He had a meditation schedule. I met another guy along the water, and he was probably in his late 50s. And we were just talking. He said he was a Buddhist, and he said he was kind of some sort of a Japanese version of Buddhism. And we were talking a long time, and I could tell he was like really, he was really into this, and he really believed it. And I found out later that he had a guy that I didn't even know he was with him. He was standing about 20 feet away, and this guy was his like Buddhist mentor. And every 3 months they meet, and they have this like whatever, Buddhist fellowship. But they were, it was like a big thing for this guy. And I didn't know I was getting in between that, but it was a fun time, and we had a great time of sharing. And another thing that's popular is like Buddhism and some of these other religions. They're doing things that Christianity is also doing. Like Buddhism is having like home groups, small groups, like cell groups. Like, Buddhism is kind of doing those things in some places. They're having Sunday school lessons, like Buddhist Sunday school. So, these things are pretty entrenched and pretty deep. And it's because, like, sin abounds. Like, sin abounds. There's emptiness. There is a void in humanity. And sin abounds. And, sin, it's like people cannot manage sin. You try to keep it in one category of your life. Maybe you have envy towards one person. And that's a relationship that envy is kind of, sprouts up. But envy, a lot of times, or that sin, like jumps the walls of categories and will enter into another relationship that didn't have any type of envy or didn't have any type of jealousy. It's like sin kind of has this spreading, this type of tendency. It moves, it spreads, it infects, it can't be just kept in a small place. It's always kind of moving. And that's kind of what we see in, many dark areas in the world and even in our life. We see like sin can abound. Like it's really interesting. So, and people cannot manage, and people cannot, they're in bondage to their old sin nature. They just, it is a trap. It is like a steel lock. They can try, but it's always going to be like bondage. You're always going to be captive, and you cannot manage it. Like sin will manage you, or sin will manage, these people. But the beautiful thing is in this Romans 5:20, it's like where sin abounded, grace abounded much more. So there was, there was sin, and it spreads and it abounds. What do? There's really only one thing, is to find something that is maybe more powerful than it and spreads more than it, and that is grace. And grace, is one of those things that is so amazing, because in the midst of all the strongholds and the spiritual strongholds that you see, like it comes in, and it's a little bit maybe unexpected for the person who experiences it. They didn't see it coming when they hear about the gospel of grace, when they hear about the character of God. Maybe the demons that were in charge of, them or that area, maybe they didn't see it coming. Maybe they thought it was like they had this down. They had this area down. But grace comes in. It surprises people. And when somebody receives it, and they do, and when they hear the grace of God, and they hear that amazing tune that they've never heard before, that is not like a religious system that is based on legalism, but life from the character of God and a relationship with God through grace and the finished work, it does something. It steals somebody away from that life of sin just when nobody was looking. And then from that person, it spreads to another person. And they start just like maybe in a John 4 woman of the well fashion. Like, I don't know what happened. I was just talking, and I heard this message, and I believed it, and I've never been the same. And somebody else is like, wow, really? That's amazing. Tell me more about that. And the grace starts to abound more than the sin. And it starts to much more abound. And that's what the gospel is about. It's starting like this forest fire of grace that, that's what the grace of God does. And that is something that also, it's kind of interesting. When it catches fire in a person's heart, it also goes beyond what they thought it could do. They thought, okay, this is a great thing. I needed this section of my life. I needed, I've got kids. I need to teach them some, life principles. I always thought I might need Christianity or a religion. So they believe and they accept. But then they find that grace of God, or that message of grace, or the power of the word, or the power of the cross. It's goes past those. It's not just about your kids. It's not just having a moral compass for your family. It's starts to take other territory. Your priorities, how you spend your time, the friends that you have. It starts to abound much more. And it's really exciting to see that in areas, and it's fun to see when you're in an environment of darkness or an environment of sin. Right in the middle of it, grace steals something out and starts this fire. And it starts to get bigger and bigger. And the environment of sin and all of that, it could do nothing about it, because there was something stronger. There was something that was more powerful. So that's the beauty of, having the gospel and having, sharing Christ with people in these parts of the world. I've found across the religions, it's not always good to generalize, but in talking to different, people from these different religions, I find that you have a few categories. One is you have people that are very fervent and are really into it. There are people that, this means a lot to them. Going to the temple, doing these types of things. And I like those people. I like those people because they know that spiritual things are important. And they know that, that this part of their life is important. So those people are fun to talk to. Then there's other people that maybe are practicing but not passionate. Maybe they do it because it's been passed down and their parents practice, so they also practice. But it doesn't mean as much to them. But there is kind of an identity, a cultural identity that they have, and they stick with it. And, those people are fun to talk to. And then there's also people that really they're not practicing, but they will say, I am a Buddhist, I am a Muslim, and they just don't practice, but it's a family thing, it's a tribe thing, it's a national thing, it's an identity thing, and that's who they are. So those people are fun to talk to too. So all of them, no matter who they are and no matter what they see, their particular religion, it's an opportunity. It's a beautiful opportunity to share something that they've never heard before. In 2 Corinthians 9:8, it says, God is able to make all grace abound towards you, that you, always always having all sufficiency in all things, may have an abundance for every good work. Grace abounds. And, by sight, the strongholds, the spiritual strongholds seem impossible. But being a missionary is really a process of learning to become more dependent on God in all of the details of your life, in all the ministry that you are involved with. You are growing if you are learning greater dependence on God, greater importance of prayer, not relying on, your gifts, not relying on these other things that perhaps through experience you have learned. But every day is an exercise of dependence. And as you become more dependent, I think you become more effective. And also, it's an example, like being on the mission field and being in these places is also, we are students of simplicity. What I mean is the more you learn about a culture, or the more you learn about a country, it can actually be a liability. And you can say, well, that can never happen, or that can never happen. But you don't know what can happen. Something can happen that's never happened before. And you have to stay simple. You have to stay simple towards God, have a simple faith. And, it's great that God sends us and he calls us. But as he sends us and he calls us, he's waiting there at the place where he's called us to receive us. That's what I love. It's like, in one sense, we're not pioneers in church planting. In one sense, we're joining the pioneer, Jesus Christ. He's the pioneer. Excuse me. He's the pioneer. And he's the one that is beckoning us to join him and co-labor with him in the place where he is working and in the place where he is calling you to. And he's waiting there for us. Cody, can we do that?